I walked in on my fiancé with my mom. They were sitting on our bed, whispering. As soon as I entered, they both jumped, and my mom started crying. Turns out my fiancé had asked her how to tell me she used to date my brother, who just came back into her life. I honestly have no idea what to do. Our wedding is in 2 weeks. It was a rainy afternoon when I came home earlier than expected. My last client had canceled, and something about the gray sky made me want to be indoors. There wasn't a real reason, just one of those quiet instincts that pull you back to your house without warning. When I stepped inside, the silence struck me. It wasn't peaceful or cozy. It was still in the wrong way. Careful, like someone had paused the house in the middle of a conversation. I moved quietly, not trying to sneak, just observing. When I got to the bedroom, the door was partly open. I saw the edge of the bed and 2 figures sitting close. It was my mother and my fiancée, Tina. They were deep in conversation, whispering urgently. The moment they saw me, they both jumped like kids caught doing something they knew was wrong. Tina went pale, and my mother, normally calm and composed, immediately started crying. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The look on my face was enough to demand an explanation. Tina was the one who spoke first. She tried to ease into it, telling me not to freak out. That phrase alone told me whatever was coming wasn't going to be small. She told me it was about Evan, my older brother. Just hearing his name out loud after all these years hit harder than I expected. Evan hadn't been around for a long time. We were never close to begin with, and after a brutal falling out with our parents, he'd cut ties and disappeared. No holidays, no birthdays, no contact. Tina said she had dated him before she met me. It was years ago, she explained, and it hadn't been serious. She claimed she never knew his last name and didn't make the connection until months into our relationship. Apparently, it all clicked when she saw an old photo in my mom's living room. A picture of Evan and me, younger, sitting on a dock at the lake. That was when she realized the man she used to date was my brother. Instead of telling me, Tina went to my mother. She didn't know how to bring it up, she said. She was scared of ruining things, of making it into something it wasn't. So she confided in my mom, hoping to find the right way to tell me. My mom confirmed everything. She said Tina came to her a few days ago, upset and confused, and she tried to comfort her. They thought they could ease me into it. That was the conversation I had walked in on. Tina insisted nothing was happening now, but she admitted Evan had reached out to her recently. She didn't answer him, she said, just saw the message and panicked. She swore she hadn't responded, hadn't met him, hadn't entertained the idea of anything. But the damage was already done. What disturbed me wasn't that she had dated Evan. That was in the past. It was the timing, the secrecy, the fact that she sat beside my mother on our bed 2 weeks before our wedding, trying to manage how I would learn the truth. Instead of trusting me, she brought in someone else. Someone who had every reason to protect me, but chose to protect her instead. There was no yelling, no confrontation. I just left the room. I told them I needed air. Tina followed me to the door, trying to explain, her voice tight and nervous. She reached for my arm, but I didn't stop. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier. I stood there for a while, letting it soak into my clothes, trying to figure out what to make of everything. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same bed where they had whispered about keeping the truth from me. I stayed on the couch, awake for hours, trying to make sense of the timeline in my head. Tina had always seemed open, grounded. But now, her past had curved back into my life like a shadow I never saw coming. And Evan, he had been gone for so long. Why now? Why reach out to her first? There were too many questions. And the wedding was only 14 days away. The morning after I found Tina and my mother whispering on the bed, I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a dull sense of unreality. It felt like my own life had shifted slightly off-center. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. The apartment was quiet. Tina hadn't tried to speak to me again. Not yet. I went through the motions, shower, coffee, keys in hand, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop replaying the way she said his name. Evan. That name hadn't been spoken in our house for years. Not after he left. Growing up, Evan had always walked a step ahead of me. He was the first to drive, the first to get into trouble, the first to be celebrated, and then quietly avoided by our parents when things started to fall apart. They didn't talk about him anymore. Not after the fights. Not after the police call. Not after he left without warning and cut off all contact. Even back then, I had no idea what had finally pushed him to disappear. He was always reckless, always testing limits, but he was still my brother. And then one day, he was just gone. It had been 5 years since any of us had seen him. And now, out of everyone in the world, the first person he reached out to was Tina. I drove over to my parents' house, needing to see things with my own eyes. My mom looked surprised to see me. My dad, as usual, kept his distance. We talked over coffee in a house that felt too clean, too quiet. I asked about Evan. My mom's hands tightened slightly around her mug. She said Evan had come back into town a few weeks ago. No one told me because they thought it wouldn't matter. He hadn't reached out to any of them. She only found out through someone at the church who had seen him downtown. The last time she spoke to him directly was years ago. There had been shouting, harsh words, some of it about money, some of it about my father. All of it left to rot in the silence after he disappeared. She admitted she hadn't even been sure he was still in the country. But she confirmed what Tina had told me. Evan had resurfaced, and somehow, he had found Tina's contact information. I asked if she thought Tina and Evan had planned it. She said no, but she didn't sound sure. On my way out, I lingered near the old cabinet in the hallway, the one with family photos stacked behind glass. I hadn't looked closely in years. Most of the pictures had been rearranged or removed. Evan's presence was faint now. Just one photo of the two of us at the lake remained, the one Tina had apparently recognized. I stared at it for a long time. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched Evan online. Most of what I found was old. A few mugshots, mentions in forums from college. One video of him playing guitar at some backyard party. But then I found his most recent activity. He had started a new Instagram account just 2 months ago. No followers, no posts, just a profile picture of a city skyline. Then I noticed something else. His account followed only a handful of people. One of them was Tina. I checked her page. It was private as always, but she was following him back. She hadn't mentioned that. I didn't message her about it right away. Instead, I sat with it. I tried to imagine a version of this that wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe she just hadn't thought it mattered. Maybe it really was just a brief relationship in her past. But then I looked again and noticed that he had liked one of her profile pictures, an older one, taken long before we got engaged. A photo I remembered her editing long after she posted it. There was a comment from Evan, left 2 weeks ago. Just one word. Classic. She had deleted the comment. But it was still cached, still traceable. And I realized this hadn't just been about some awkward coincidence from years ago. This was current, quiet, careful. When Tina came home that evening, she looked exhausted. She asked if I wanted to talk. I told her not yet. But in my head, the timeline had already shifted. It wasn't just about what happened before we met. It was about what was still happening, quietly, underneath everything. The idea that Evan had found her, messaged her, and she hadn't shut it down immediately, that she responded at all, felt like a slow betrayal, stretched out over weeks. Even if nothing physical had happened, the secrecy mattered. The fact that she told my mother before she told me mattered. I couldn't shake the image of them sitting together, whispering on our bed, as if I was something fragile that needed to be managed. As the second night passed, I started to wonder if this wedding was still mine, or if I had already lost it to someone I thought was gone for good. And worse, I started to wonder if Tina even knew how much of her heart was still wrapped around someone who had already walked away once. The version of the truth she gave me was just enough to be technically honest, but everything about it felt edited, calculated. And if that was true, then I had no idea how much of the life I was building with her had been real, and how much had already started cracking before I ever saw the fault lines. Over the next few days, the distance between Tina and me became impossible to ignore. She tried to keep things normal, making coffee in the morning, asking if I needed anything from the store, reminding me to send final confirmations for the wedding. Her voice stayed light, polite, steady, but there was a quiet panic in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. I kept going through the motions too, but inside, the pressure was building. I hadn't brought up the social media discovery. I hadn't mentioned the comment Evan had left, or the fact that they were still connected online. I was watching her closely, and every time she avoided my gaze or fumbled over something small, another brick in my trust cracked loose. On the fourth night, I asked her directly, calmly, without raising my voice, whether she had met Evan in person since he came back. She hesitated just a second too long before saying no. Then she added that he had texted her a few times, but she hadn't answered anything after the first message. That was the moment I knew she was still lying. I told her I had seen their profiles, that I knew she'd followed him back. I told her I'd found the comment he left. Her face changed instantly. She looked cornered, like something in her had been forced to surface too soon. She admitted they had met once, at a cafe near the park. She said it wasn't romantic, that he wanted to apologize for how things ended, and she agreed to meet him because she felt like it would give her closure. She claimed she hadn't told me because she knew how it would look, and she didn't want to bring unnecessary stress into our lives so close to the wedding. She kept using that word, stress, as if I was a fragile object that couldn't handle weight, as if protecting me meant hiding things. I asked her if she had told Evan we were getting married. She nodded, then said he had been surprised, but supportive. It was an obvious lie. Evan had never been the supportive type. And more importantly, I had seen the way she had gone still when she mentioned his name the first time. That wasn't the reaction of someone who'd neatly closed a chapter in her life. That was something else. I pressed her harder. I asked if they had seen each other more than once. She denied it. I asked again. Her story wavered. She admitted there had been one more meeting, brief, according to her, at a bar, unplanned. He showed up while she was out with friends. I asked why she hadn't mentioned any of it until I caught her. She had no real answer, just that she didn't want to ruin things. I told her that not telling me had already done that. That night, I didn't sleep in the apartment. I stayed at a friend's place and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I was even supposed to do with the information I now had. This wasn't cheating, not in the obvious way, but it felt like a kind of emotional trespass, something that had happened behind my back, wrapped in silence and careful omissions. The next morning, I drove to Evan's address. I had found it easily. He wasn't exactly subtle about his return. He opened the door with that same smirk he always had when we were kids, the one that made you feel like you were already losing the moment you walked in. He didn't act surprised to see me. He didn't deny anything. He even poured himself a drink while I stood there and waited. I asked him why. Why reach out to her? Why now? He shrugged, told me he hadn't planned anything. He said he was just curious, that he hadn't known I was engaged to her until they started talking again. He made it sound casual, but his tone was deliberate, like he wanted me to feel uncertain, like he wanted to be the ghost in the room, the one who had already lived inside her memory long before I arrived. He told me he never tried to win her back, that she had made her choice. But the way he said it made it clear, he knew he still had some kind of grip on her. Even if it wasn't romantic, it was enough to cause chaos. Before I left, I asked him one last question. I wanted to know if he would have told me, if I hadn't found out. He didn't answer, just smiled and closed the door. By the time I got back to the apartment, Tina had left for work. There was a note on the table, short, apologetic, vague. It didn't change anything. The wedding was now 11 days away. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space where our invitation list had once been. And in that silence, I realized something that should have hit me earlier. Tina might have chosen me, but not completely. Not honestly. Not entirely. And Evan, he didn't want her back. He just wanted to prove he still mattered. That he could still touch the edges of my life and leave fingerprints I couldn't scrub off. Both of them had betrayed me in different ways. And now, it was up to me to decide what to do with the pieces they left behind. Over the next 2 days, I spoke to almost no one. I didn't tell Tina where I was staying. I didn't answer texts from friends who were finalizing their RSVP lists. I didn't return my mother's calls. The apartment sat untouched. The wedding folder remained closed. It was strange how quickly things began to unravel once I stopped pretending they were whole. I kept going over the timeline, not just of Evan's return or Tina's conversations with him, but of everything that came before, subtle changes in her mood, quiet moments when she'd seemed distant, too quick to brush off questions or shift subjects. I had ignored those signs, dismissed them as stress, as she'd wanted me to. But they had been there, and now I couldn't unsee them. On the third night, I returned to the apartment. Tina was home, pacing in the living room, eyes red from crying. She looked relieved when she saw me, like some part of her had still been hoping I'd come back ready to forgive. I didn't offer her that. I told her calmly that I was calling everything off. The wedding, the honeymoon, the lease renewal. Everything. She didn't react at first. She just stared at me like I had punched the air out of her lungs. Then the questions came, fast and sharp. Was I really throwing it all away over something from her past? Did I honestly think she wanted Evan? Hadn't she chosen me? Hadn't she tried to do the right thing? I didn't answer all of them. Some didn't deserve answers. Instead, I explained that it wasn't just about Evan. It was about trust. About the fact that when things became difficult, she didn't come to me. She went behind me. She let someone who had already broken our family once wedge himself into our relationship. And even when she realized the damage that might cause, she hid it until she couldn't anymore. She cried again, harder this time. Not the silent tears from before, but the kind that came with desperation. She promised it had never gone further, that she had never once thought about actually going back to him. Maybe that was true, but it didn't matter. By then, I wasn't questioning what she had done. I was questioning who she had become around me, and whether I ever really knew her at all. The next day, I made the necessary calls. I canceled the venue, spoke to the caterer, the photographer, the florist. Most vendors were sympathetic. Some were annoyed. A few fees were non-refundable. I didn't care. I emailed the guests, told them the wedding wouldn't be happening. I didn't give a reason. That night, I packed my things. Not in anger, not in a rush. Just methodically. Tina sat on the edge of the bed, silent, watching me fold shirts and stack them in boxes. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe she finally understood. Before I left her a letter. Not because I owed her one, but because I needed to say things I didn't want to explain face to face. I told her that I had loved her deeply, that I had believed in what we were building. But love built on quiet compromises and half-truths always ends up cracked. I told her that the moment I walked in on her whispering with my mother, planning how to manage me, I realized I was no longer a partner in our relationship. I was an obstacle, someone they needed to ease into a difficult truth instead of someone they could face openly. I told her I hoped she found peace, but I wouldn't be the one helping her find it. Then I walked out, and I didn't look back. The day we were supposed to get married, I took a long walk through the old part of the city. The sun was sharp that afternoon, the kind that makes everything feel both clean and raw. I passed couples taking photos, tourists sipping coffee, street performers chasing attention. At one point, I saw a man walking ahead of me who looked like Evan. Same build, same walk. He turned the corner before I could be sure. I didn't follow. Later that evening, Tina showed up at my parents' house. She had driven across town in the dress she was supposed to wear to the rehearsal dinner. Her makeup had started to run. She asked to see me. My mother met her at the door. I didn't hear exactly what was said, but my mother didn't invite her in. For the first time, she didn't defend her. When I looked through the curtain, I saw Tina standing on the porch, looking up at the window where I used to sleep as a kid. She stood there for a while. Then she turned and left. I never saw her again after that. As for Evan, I have no doubt he got what he wanted. Maybe not Tina. Maybe not some dramatic victory. But he had managed to prove that he could still cause damage, just by showing up. The difference was, this time, I didn't let it fester. I didn't hold onto the pieces. I let them break. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like the only real choice I had left. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.